now moving on to rationalizing the denominator. So we've done this before, and we've talked about monomials and binomials. So with monomials, it's a little different approach. Binomials are on the back side. So with monomials, it's basically saying that there's a radical on the bottom, we have to take care of it. So to do that, you literally only multiply the top and the bottom by that said radical. So right here, now multiply the numerator and denominator by the radical. So the radical here is 5, so we're going to multiply by the square root of 5 top and bottom. That gets you 3 square root of 5. And we've talked about multiplying radicals inside with inside, outside with outside. So that gets you 2 square root of 25 because 5 times 5 is 25. Now we have talked about what happens when you do the same thing times the same thing in a radical. The radicals, if it's a square root only, it'll cancel and just get you 5. Okay, so we end up getting 3 square root of 5 over, this is 5, so that turns into this, 2 times 5, which is 10. Now you should always simplify the 3 and the 10 if it's possible, but it's not in the situation, so this is your answer. All right, number 8's a little different. It's not divisible by each other, so we're going to do the whole we can simplify thing. Okay, and there's different approaches. You can simplify some of this now and some of it later. Square root of 15 does not simplify, and I'll just prove it to you. Divide it by 3 and you get 5, and voila, you can't simplify it. So we're just going to multiply right away. You can simplify the 8, but we're not going to. So we're going to do 8 times 15, and that gets you 120. So you get the square root of 120, and the square root of 15 times the square root of 15 is just 15. So now we're going to simplify the square root of 120. I know 120 is divisible by 2, so I'm going to divide by 2, and that gets you 60. You can divide by 2 again, and that gets you 30. Divide by 2 again, and that gets you 15. And we can divide that by 3, and we get 5. So we get one pair of 2's. That's it. So that comes out, and then we're left with others on the inside. Well, that's 15, that's 2, so it's 30. And this is your answer. Now let's go over it. 2 and 15 can't simplify. You cannot not simplify the square root of 30 and the 15. The only way you can simplify this is this method over here by actually simplifying the square root. 30 and 15 are not divisible, and it does not give you 2 square root of 2. So don't do it. Okay? So I'm going to do 10 with you. And I'm going to do 11. No, I'm not going to do 10 with you. I'm sorry. I'm going to do 11. I'm going to do 12. And I'm going to do 13, and I think that should be enough. If it's not, message me and I'll record myself doing those examples, okay? So number 11 is still a binomial. You still have one bottom or term on the bottom. So we're going to multiply the square root of 2 top and bottom. Okay, now with this, you have to distribute it. Okay, you can't just multiply it to the 2. So you get 8 and 2 multiplied together is the square root of 16, which makes life easy. Square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just 2, and square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just 2. We know the square root of 16 is 4. So you get 4 minus 2 over 2, that's 2, divided by 2, and the answer is 1, okay? So the problems we've been doing have only one term on the bottom. If they have more than one term on the bottom, you have to use what's called the conjugate. And basically, it's just the opposite operation, and we've talked about this. Opposite operation. So number 12, binomial, 2 terms. We're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate, and the conjugate is 4 minus the square root of 2 because it's opposite operation. Okay. And the thing we have also talked about is how this can be easier, but let's do the top first. So 4 times 4, 16. 4 and the square root of 2 can't combine, and this is the inside of a square root, this is the outside. So 4 square root of 2. Now when you're multiplying conjugates, you have to FOIL this. But if you remember, I told you in the beginning of the year when we did stuff like this, you can multiply the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms because when you FOIL, the middle terms will cancel out. So 4 times 4 is 16, and the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is negative 2. Now, you can only do this because they're conjugates, okay? There's no other way you can do it. You also cannot cancel out the 16, so don't even think about it, okay? This gets me 16 minus 4 square root of 2 all over 14, and can't touch this. Square root of 16, or my side, bad. 16, 4, and 14 are all even, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. Get you 8, 2, and 7. So your actual final answer is 8 minus 2 square root of 2 over 7. And that's it. That's the problem. All right, 13 is the last one I want to do, so I'm not talking to you for too long, and hopefully, again, this is review. two terms, I have to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate, which means you're adding instead of subtracting. And you're going to go to multiply the top. So when you multiply the top, square root of 3 times 1 is just the square root of 3, because 1 times anything is just what you multiply by. And then square root of 3 and the 4 square root of 2 go together. You can only put the 3 and the 2 together, so you get plus 4 square root of 6. And since this is a conjugate, I only have to multiply the first two terms and the last two terms. You can only do that because it's a conjugate. If they're not conjugates, you have to FOIL. Keep that in mind. 1 times 1 is 1, and then 4 times 4 is 16, and the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. Square root of 6 can't simplify, the square root of 3 can't simplify. Okay, so we're left with those. We just gotta do some math. It'll be 1 minus, and then 16 times 2 is 32. So you subtract 1, so it's 32, and you get negative 31. And that answer I'm okay with. I really would like the negative sitting out in front. Okay, I would really like it sitting out in front of the parentheses, or distributing it in. Okay, I really don't like the negative on the bottom, but it's really not the big deal. All right, that's it for that, for dividing radicals. If you have any questions, again, just get a hold of me. Thanks, bye.